Okay. Well, welcome everybody, and a very warm welcome to today's webinar, where we will be shining a light on shadow IT. I'm Katie from the customer success team here at Cledara, and it's my pleasure to be hosting today. And I am really excited about today's guest. So I'm going to go straight into the intros. First of all, I'm joined by Amy Musto. Amy, you look after our customer success team, and you've got a really interesting background in programming and finance. Amy's worked across SaaS companies such as SendGrid and Automogs, and is now here with us at Cledara, delivering exceptional customer experiences. Welcome, Amy. How are you today?
Very good. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you so much for joining. And you're over in Denver, right? You're in our Denver office.
Yep, Denver. Yep. It's snowing, or there's snow on the ground at least here.
Oh, ski season very soon.
Yes, very soon.
Well, thanks for joining, and also very excited to have our special guest with us today and our subject matter expert, our very own co-founder and COO, Brad van Leeuwen. For those of you who don't know, Brad has over 20 years of experience in building fintech products, as well as advising and investing in tech startups. He's one of the longest serving and highest ranked Techstars startup mentors globally. And on top of making sure that operations run smoothly here at Cledara, he is, and I'm sure he won't mind me saying this, obsessed with all things data, and actually was key in building our latest report, The State of Shadow IT, which we're going to be talking about today. So thanks so much for joining us today, Brad. How are you?
Doing great, but I think you just described me as an old geek.
Never. And this is not being recorded, so it's not on record. Well, thank you so much for making the time, both of you. In just a moment, I will hand over to Amy and Brad for what's going to be a very insightful conversation. Before we do that, some very quick housekeeping. So today we're going to be talking about shadow IT. Now, if you've joined and you don't really know what shadow IT is and why you should be concerned about it, don't worry, we have you covered. We'll be explaining exactly what shadow IT is. And for those of you here today who already know about shadow IT and are worried about it and want some tips and tricks about how you can really mitigate the risks for your company, we'll be discussing that as well. After that, I'll give a very short demo on how you can use Cledara to discover and manage your shadow IT. And of course, we're going to have plenty of time, I hope, for a Q&A. So the session's being recorded, as you can see, and will be made available. Back on the Q&A, if you do have a question, you'll see a Q&A section at the bottom of your Zoom. Start submitting your questions as soon as they come to you, and we'll address them at the end. And just finally, it's so great to see so many customers on the call today. A few names I recognize, but there are some that I don't. So if you're not a Cledara customer yet and are interested in finding out more, I'm just going to launch a very quick poll, and you can give us your name and email address, and we will reach out to you. Okay, that's enough. I will now hand over to Amy and Brad. Over to you.
Great. Thanks, Katie. And thank you, Brad, for joining. This is going to be a great conversation. I know a lot of customers have been asking us to do this webinar, especially based on the most recent ebook that we came out about shadow IT. So Brad, let's start with the basics, I guess, before we get too far into the weeds of, can you kind of give us a shadow IT 101? What is it, and why should we be concerned?
For sure. Thanks, Amy. Look, shadow IT, it sounds scary. It's one of those words that have existed forever. But in the case of SaaS, it's super simple. It's just the software that your team thinks is going to help them do their job and could be great that you might not know about, right? So on one hand, it's really good. You've got the entrepreneurial spirit among your team. You've hired someone who's an expert in what they do. They know the software that can help them be great. They've gone ahead, they've got that, and they're using it, right? That's great for them. It's great for their productivity. It's great for morale. It's great for your teams on one hand. On the other hand, this is often software that you don't know about, that you're not managing, that may introduce risks that you don't know about. It can also obviously be a vector for wasted money. So I think the headline here is, on one hand, it's great. On the other hand, you probably need to know about it, because at some point it is going to bite you, whether that's some sort of risk coming to bear, some sort of data breach, certainly more burn than you expect. And now's a really great time to get ahead of it, because this is something that's we see in our data only getting more challenging for companies to manage. You know, on one hand, many of us have been working decentralized or remote for a really long time now, and you know, people have new ways to adopt shadow IT, right? There can be less kind of supervision, less effective control environment, but also we'll talk about this later, I think. AI, right? AI has captured the world's attention. I think it's ChatGPT's 1-year birthday today or yesterday, right? And this is something that for sure most of us on this call have tried, gotten value from, but you know yourself, you probably tried it and used it without going through your company's procurement process for using ChatGPT. So it's something also that we're all part of.
Great. You know, recently you spoke at Web Summit in the keynote, and you shared some data around the scale of the problem using Cledara data. Can you walk us through the biggest points of your talk around informal SaaS shadow IT?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, this was a super interesting part of our keynote at Web Summit in Lisbon last week. So taking a step back, Cledara has the largest data set in the world on SaaS purchasing usage, renewal, and churn. Whilst we're on the webinar today, we're going to get about another 20,000 data points, right? So 20,000 more data points that contributes to analysis like this that we like to share. And if you do want to see it, do sign up to our newsletter. Do drop us a note. This is one of 15 slides in this Web Summit presentation where we talk not only about shadow IT and the wider market. What we did, we really wanted to understand the extent to which shadow IT is used in business. So we did a deep dive with 200 companies to understand how much shadow IT they were using, what teams were using it, what type of tools companies were using with shadow IT. And this was a really broad study. So among the 200 companies, it included very large SaaS buyers, probably vendors that some of us on this call will be using as suppliers to us, some very small companies as well as ones that had specific reasons, ironically, not to use shadow IT, right? Whether that was they were fintech companies and literally were breaking regulatory obligations by using shadow IT. Maybe some of these companies were cybersecurity businesses that were literally selling security, but not having an effective IT control environment, as it turns out. And others of them were holding really sensitive personal data. So there were some healthcare tech companies among this lot that were holding things like genetic data or medical records, things that you really wouldn't want to become compromised. And interestingly, it also included plenty of companies that had successfully passed SOC 2 and ISO 27001 audits. So those are audits that are checking your IT security environment. And what was super interesting is that no matter which way you slice this data, companies on average are using more shadow IT than approved IT, right? They're using more unapproved software than software that had been through a formal procurement process. That's because people are picking the software they want, right? Not the software necessarily that they're given. And they want to be great at their jobs. And if that means pulling out a credit card themselves or signing up to a free tool, they're going to do that unless there's an easy way they can get IT approved within their business. The headline is that more than half of companies in this study, so more than 100 of the 200 companies studied, have more than half of their software stack being shadow IT. The other interesting thing is it happens across all teams. Ironically, we even saw unapproved tools being used by the very teams whose job it was to police and approve them. So IT was using shadow IT, which kind of blew my mind. Compliance was using shadow IT. But of course, they were not the worst culprit. Sales and marketing accounted for 65%. of all shadow IT used. And this, I think we can all intuitively understand, right? Sales teams being comped on, revenue, hitting revenue targets or booking demos. If they believe that they can do something that's going to help them, book that next demo, close that next deal, and they're literally being paid for it, there's an incentive for them to try new things and experiment. So the headline is here, probably all companies have a shadow IT challenge that they need to address. The other ironic thing is that well, not ironic thing, but interesting thing is, as we look at this data and we look at the different teams, ChatGPT probably deserves its own wedge on this pie chart. It's by far the most frequently used piece of shadow IT. So in summary here, I think for everyone on this call that is wondering, do they have a shadow IT problem or not? The answer is probably yes. And we'll talk about maybe the risks why later, particularly with AI. But if the most sophisticated companies that have serious repercussions for using shadow IT in terms of fines or loss of licenses are using it, probably you are too.
Sure. Yeah, let's talk specifically a little bit more about the risks, because I think it's not just, do you have a handle of what's in your software stack? Is there a risk being posed to the company if you ignore it or you're not on top of it? And what are some of those risks look like?
It's a great question. I think it really depends where you are in your journey as a company and where your customers expect you to be. So Katie mentioned during the start of the call that I've been mentoring with Techstars for more than 10 years, usually on go-to-market, but we do cover more broad things. And the thing is, if you're starting out, if you're getting your first customers, unless you have a specific reason to think about this, don't worry about it, right? Like that early on, you should care about two things: writing code and finding people that will pay you for that code. Don't over-index on procedures and policies and controls and all those things. The thing is, as you grow, you won't be able to get away with it forever, right? When you're small, you benefit from security through obscurity. As you get bigger, you will become a target, right? And the repercussions for becoming a target can be quite severe. Billions have been wiped off Okta's market cap, as an example, who were compromised through their customer support software recently, and more information is coming out about what data has been leaked, and it's affecting them not just once, but every time there's a new discovery about the repercussions of that. So it does depend on how far along that journey you are. The thing to know about that journey is that if you are successful building your company, you're going to have to care about it at some point, right? It's either going to be because you'll eventually sign a deal where a customer will say, oh, great, but before we implement, show us your SOC 2 certificate, show us your information security management policy. We need to see these things. Or it could be later on, right? So chatting before this call with Amy, used to work at SendGrid. I was chatting with an early SendGrid employee a few weeks ago who was preparing their prospectus for their IPO, right? And in the prospectus, you've got to list every risk you possibly have in the business so that future shareholders don't sue you for not disclosing risks. And one risk for everyone that uses cloud software is, do you have shadow IT? And they had to go through this process of, though they had information security controls before their IPO, they weren't going to meet that threshold of, let's not get SendGrid sued. And so they had to do a lot of last minute mitigation. And that was a very disruptive thing for the organization, the culture, the operational processes. So what everyone on this call needs to think about is, if your customers are likely to expect you to be secure in the future, if you're ambitious and expecting an IPO, or you're expecting to grow, you've got to think about what point you bring this in. Some companies in this study could literally lose their license to operate by virtue of this. But frankly, like as a founder, even more than that, I just don't want to appear on the cover of the Wall Street Journal or New York Times or the Financial Times for letting important, sensitive data of our customers escape. There are far more important things that I'd rather be focused on than worrying about that newspaper risk.
Right. You know, the tools that are out there now in AI, Chat GPT being one of them that you have already brought up, are pretty exciting, and employees, business owners, everybody is wanting to try it out, see what it can do for your business. It's actually coined a new term for us, shadow AI. Can you talk a little bit about shadow AI and some of the risks and what you need to be aware of?
Yeah, look, and I think you should totally try ChatGPT. Like with it, I've started to code Python again with a bit of help from Replit and ChatGPT. It's super, super powerful. And you know, the thing about it is that it is such a compelling thing to try. Everyone can be better at their jobs. Everyone can learn new skills. People are going to try it. The thing about it is that it offers new vectors for your data and your know-how as a business to be compromised. So every time you put data into ChatGPT or another online service, you run the risk that data gets added to the corpus of data that AI model is trained on. So take Cledara's case. We've got this very large data set on SaaS purchasing, usage, renewal, and churn. If I was to dump it into, or someone on the team were to get access to it and dump it into ChatGPT, all those interesting insights that we surface through our product or use for our marketing could be available indirectly to other users of ChatGPT, because ChatGPT may learn what we've put into it. So like that, we run the risk of eroding like long-term defensibility, competitive advantage, and also the value that our customers receive through our product. I think you also need to be very, very careful about certain types of data that people may put into an AI tool like ChatGPT. So anything around personal identifying data or other sensitive data can similarly be leaked through ChatGPT. So, you know, you imagine you were some sort of health tech company holding medical records, and you say, hey, here's Katie's medical records, would you summarize them for me? You run the risk that someone else could learn about Katie's medical records, right? And that's something you definitely don't want, because these things can really result in reputational damage and serious impact on your revenue. The reality is that these are not necessarily new risks, right? Data leaks, sensitivity of personal data, the opportunity for your competitors to learn what you know as a business. These are not new. And that's why we care about shadow IT. The thing about shadow AI is that it dials it up, right? It dials it up because more and more people are adopting these tools. So more shadow IT is coming in than ever. And we don't fully understand yet all the different vectors of risk that may arise as a result. And so helping your organization navigate that and proactively thinking about it is super important. Just as a statistic, in Q3 this year, ChatGPT accounted for 0.17% of all SaaS usage on the Cledara platform. So far in Q4, that's nearly 0.3%, right? So it's nearly doubled over the course of a quarter. It's the most commonly used shadow AI tool. There's a ton more AI tools behind that. The usage of it's only going to grow. And so I think the question on this call, and we can talk about how to do this if it's interesting, but if anyone's got a question later on, but thinking about how we set up things like AI policies, how we set up things like training and awareness for the team, because nobody wants to be the person that gave away your company's competitive advantage, but also people haven't used this stuff before, and so they need to be helped to understand the risks.
Definitely. Thanks. Education is key with getting your employees up to speed, and you want to be able to support them with these new tools, but you want them to be smart. They don't want to be that weak link for sure. Now, as most companies, a lot of our customers and with us in general, we have our SOC 2, and a lot of times, people are in the middle of working on a SOC 2 or an ISO. And, what can you give us a little bit of background on what these certifications are and how Cledara also helps support making sure that when you're tested or you need to do your SOC 2 or ISO, you have all those controls in place?
Well, I'm trying to figure out if I should give the politically correct answer or the real one. I think, look, the reality is that SOC 2 and ISO 27001, and luckily, I don't think anyone from those bodies responsible for those standards are on this call. They are marketing documents, right? What they involve in practice is that they check that you've got all the right policies in place, and an auditor will come and check that there's evidence that you're following those policies over a window of time. And if they do, if they find that that's the case, they'll give you a certificate that you can put on your website, use in your sales process, and so on. They're very helpful for scale. They're helpful for selling to enterprise. They're helpful if you want to move up market. The point of them is that they show your customers that they've got a reason to trust you that's been independently verified. The thing is, though, that's the marketing side of it, right? Because just because you've got the policies and just because you can provide enough evidence to an auditor that they can check, it doesn't necessarily mean you're secure. Otherwise, no big company would be hacked, right? Because every big company has those certificates and audits in place. The reality is it comes down to your culture and your controls, right? And that's why I say it's a marketing document. The fact that it's good practice is not enough. We saw in our study, for example, that companies that were either SOC 2 or ISO 27001 compliant, meaning they'd been successfully audited, used on average 100 shadow IT products in their SaaS stack, compared to an average in the overall study of 75. So there's an irony, like these sophisticated companies that have been successfully through these audits are actually using more shadow IT. And you've got to ask yourself why auditors didn't spot them, right? Surely that would be a very big red cross on your audit. I think the reality is that auditors find it difficult to identify them just as much as IT managers and finance teams. And, though you can clearly pass an audit without managing shadow IT, because all these companies have, what you need to think about is, what do you need to sleep at night? And is the substance of your IT security framework important, or is the marketing document important? And you need to make a choice. There may be no right answer. You may just like the marketing document. But I think the thing is, it's these certifications are the first step, not the last one, if you are serious about your IT security.
Great. Well, that is a really important security side and things that people need to take into account. But looking at the audience today, what is the good news that we can take away? What's the exciting news?
Well, the first thing is, if you've got shadow IT, or you don't know if you've got it, but now realize you probably do, you're not alone. Like, everyone has it. The question is, what can you do to start to get it under control, right? And you may want to get it under control because you don't want to end up on the cover of the Financial Times. Or you may want to get it under control because you don't like the idea you're wasting money on software that you don't know about. And I think Katie will run through it later, but Cledara Engage is a really great vector for people to understand the IT, the real politic, what actual software is being used in your business. And so you can take actions. You can actually bring that shadow IT into the light, right? You can review it and say, actually, no, we're happy we're using this. Let's document that that's okay. it could give you the opportunity to identify a lot of savings, right? We've heard stories from customers. Katie, you were ex-type form, I think, before coming to us, right? The really common one is people have 3 type forms and 2 survey monkeys, and who's using one of them is not talking to product marketing who's using another one. So you have the opportunity to consolidate your stack with this as well. And it gives you an opportunity to understand how your business is operating, right? Your software in a lot of teams is your process, right? And if you're growing as a business, you need to know how your processes operate so that you can scale them and you don't trip over them. And so I think using a tool like Cledara Engage can be a great way to get started on all those things and just become a little more secure, a little more compliant, and save a little bit of money along the way as well.
Fantastic. Actually, I think, is that a great point for me to do a quick share and show everyone Cledara Engage. So for our customers on the call, you'll probably already know this, and you'll already have some great data there if you're using Cledara Engage. For those of you who aren't familiar with Cledara Engage, this is our easy to install browser extension. So across Safari, Firefox, Chrome, anything Chromium based. And we've divided this into 3 sections. I'm just going to focus on 2 today. So we show you your providers, and I want you to think about this as your approved software list. This is all the software you've already added to Cledara, so this can be managed. And this is what Brad was saying just now about, this is going to give you that great information about how much software your software is going to get used, help you make those decisions about, are you getting the ROI you expect? Is the software that you've bought giving you that the return on investment that you expect? Is it getting used? So this is everything you know about and you can manage. But under informal SaaS, this is your shadow IT. So this is your list of everything that is software, because that's all we're going to be showing you under Engage, anything that's software that is being used through the business. As Brad was saying, could be very innocent, could be free software, could be free trials, but this is the place that you can come and make sure you get ahead of that you're adhering to those compliance certifications, right? You can get the full view, the full stack. And you can get ahead of this and add any tools straight to Cledara from here. And the second piece I wanted to show you today, I know we've got some questions, so I really want to make sure we leave some time for that. But the second piece I did want to show everyone today, Brad, you talked a lot about process and policy and being as good as the process and policies you put in place. So in Cledara, you can bring your procurement process into Cledara. Everyone in the company can have access to see your applications or your software list, stopping those duplicates, Typeform, SurveyMonkey, one of the most commons. And you can come here when you add an application, someone's going to be telling you the software they want to use, the team it's in, the budget. But if you use our compliance module, and if you're interested in this, let us know, you can actually bring in some compliance questions. Have you got questions about that supplier's data security? Do you want to already be pulling those in here when someone's thinking about bringing on a new software? That was the super quick demo, Cledara demo. But if you're interested, we got the chat. You can send us a Q&A and we can reach out and show you a little bit more.
I think, Katie, just on that, apologies for interrupting. As we touched on earlier, every company that's successful will have to cross this bridge at some point. And so for the people on this call thinking about how they do that, there are basically 2 ways. There's the way where you do nothing until that minute that you need to do it. I remember at my last company, we didn't have any systems in place, and we'd convinced the Bank of England to let us integrate directly to the core payment system of the UK. And that was all done until they said, where's your ISO 27001? And we had to go through this painful panic to quickly triage it and set it up and change the way we worked really quickly. Or you can introduce it in a more structured way, right? You might not be going straight to having that, going through that audit process, but you want to make people in the business aware of the security implications of the things that they're using to do their job and helping them understand the context that exists in. So you might not be going straight into an audit, but you can be introducing over time these types of questions to help people understand that before you go all in. And so by the time that comes, it's much, much easier.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks, Brad. I'll stop sharing for a moment there. because we've had a really great question come in that I would love to get us. I've got a couple of good questions, but one from Federico. Can you see that up on your screen?
Yes, I can.
Perfect. So I'll just kind of read it aloud. So first of all, thank you so much for the presentation, Amy and Brad. Quick question. As SaaS applications become increasingly integral to business operations, what role does the IT department play to ensure regulatory compliance and mitigating the risks associated with unapproved SaaS? And also as kind of a second part about actually rolling out and installing the Engage feature. Perhaps some people find it challenging in the sense that maybe the rest of the company don't really understand what's going on. Could you speak to us just about that as well?
Yeah, I think it's a really great question, because everyone on this call is going to be on a journey as a business and also on a journey with their operations, right? So in a mature organization, you're going to have a CISO, a chief information security officer, you're going to have a security team, you're going to have a legal team of contracts, you're going to have an IT team administering those policies, adding, removing users, doing different control, prevent and detect processes, right? But at the start, let's imagine you're much smaller than that, right? And you're going to be, say, 50 people. Maybe there isn't even an IT team. Maybe it's finance that's doing those procedures and processes in a business. And I think the risk in a way is the same, right? You don't want something to happen that will compromise your business. And it might not, early on, you might not be doing the heavy duty types of things that a CISO might be doing. But at the start, you might be doing things like documenting basic processes. You might be doing basic training around data, especially if you're European or a European company or have European customers and GDPR is important to you, or that you've got customers in California and CCPA is important to you. So it might start lightweight that way. And then over time, you're going to add more complexity, right? You're going to add controls around what software you buy. You're going to maintain a list of vendors. So even so that when you raise money and inevitably a VC fund asks you for your list of vendors, you've got it ready, right? So I think if you are planning to grow and be successful and you're in finance or you're an early hire in IT, you need to think strategically about what's the right thing to do when on that journey and not leave it all to the last minute. In terms of Engage, I can see that I think you probably saw a preview of that feature a couple of years ago before it went to general release. A lot's been done to make it really easy to deploy. So on one hand, users can deploy it to their own machine directly, or if you're using a managed browser through Google Workspace or so on, your IT team can deploy it remotely to your managed browsers, right? And the user doesn't even need to log in. I think you also touch on a really important question, is how do you bring your team along in that journey, right? I think I think there's an education piece, right? Because a tool like Engage, what it does track, it detects if someone's accessing software, and it says what software have they accessed, when did they access, and what user accessed it, right? So making people aware that it's tracking that, and it doesn't see their Facebook usage. You can see in our product that you actually, another way to think about the shadow IT, it's actually a log of the data we collect, right? It shows you all the information we're receiving from your users. And so if it's not on that list, it's data that Cledara doesn't see. And then the other piece is around education. Why is this important for your business? Why are you deploying this to their browsers? And that's really so that you can manage the shadow IT. It's so that you can see you're getting ROI on the SaaS you know about as well. And that, in the end, if you're deploying it to a work browser and a work device, it's your responsibility as a business to manage those risks. And so you need to be proactive about it.
Great, Brad and Eve, I know we're running just slightly over time, but even to share here at Cledara, right, our own head of IT, we'll check that regularly and we'll get a ping if something crops up, and it's a friendly, hey, what's this tool? How's it being used? And it's about regularly coming and looking at that section as well.
For sure. Like, this is not, catching people out, right? You want that entrepreneurial spirit. Like at Cledara, it's super important. You want to hire smart people and you want them to tell you the software they need to be great at their job, not the other way around, right? So you want this entrepreneurial spirit, but there does have to be some guardrails, right? So in our case, we are, a regulated financial institution in, a bunch of countries, and that comes with regulatory obligations specifically related to shadow IT. But even beyond that, we have an obligation to keep our customers' data secure. Our customers expect that of us. And so we have to have some processes and controls. Those controls can be prevent type controls, and these are things like processes and policies, but they also need a complete control environment. Doesn't just live on prevent controls, it also lives on detect controls. And so a tool like Engage is a really simple, lightweight detect control where IT teams can become aware in a seamless way of potential shadow IT usage, so they can go have that chat. And that chat most of the time is, geez, Katie, if you just had told me, you would have approved it. Let's just click this button and click approve. But sometimes it might save you some money or some risk as well.
Fantastic. We have got more questions, but what I was going to suggest is that actually anything left, we actually take over to our Cledara Insiders. So if anyone on the call hasn't joined our community, we have recently launched our Cledara community, Cledara Insiders, and I can send the link out to anyone who'd like to join there. But we can move the rest of the conversation over there and happily share the recording. And also, I'm sure, Brad, you'd be happy to jump in and answer any questions over in the Insiders chat.
For sure. Look forward to seeing everyone there.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much to everyone for joining today. A big thank you to Brad and Amy. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thanks, Katie.
It was super insightful. Make sure you join us next week. Next week, our colleagues of mine, Julia and Bryn, are going to be sharing some best practices from Cledara. We've got some customers have shared what they've been doing that's been working really well. So that's going to be a fantastic webinar next week. We'll be sending out an invite very soon. So thank you very much, everyone. Have a great rest of the day.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye now.
Bye.